You're on screen now.
Oh, I am. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess we're starting. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you came in today. Good morning. Good morning, everybody online. If there is anybody online, we've got a new podium here, so I'm going to try and. I don't know if that's going to get me sitting. It's a little tall.
It hasn't adjusted.
Yeah.
Oh.
There we go. I think that's a little bit better. You know, sometimes you get these real high, you feel like, remember when you're a little kid and you go into a restaurant and you're sitting, and you're, barely.
I still do that sometimes.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, there are times when the counter or the table.
You can't sit up anymore. That's all my secrets, Susan.
Morning, Jerry.
Morning. Yeah.
All right, it's okay if we go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and let's just do a centering just for, a few seconds and, put ourselves here. I invite you to close your eyes if you choose. Just let your feet rest peacefully on the ground. I want you to just feel your body relaxing. Let that tension that you've been carrying just in a few hours this morning since you awakened. Let it go. And let that light of that wonderful, beautiful spirit that you carry with you at all times, let that take center stage. Because that is the true you. Feel the love inside your heart. Let that love just flow around the room, mixing with everybody, knowing that we're all here to have a good discussion and maybe learn something from a different perspective, be able to contribute in ways that are going to be beneficial to all of us. Thank you, God. Namaste. Okay, again, welcome.
Turn on your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh,
I think we're here now.
yeah, you're here.
Good morning, Dwayne. Okay, so I've got a couple questions that we're going to be trying to answer. First of all, who did Jesus criticize and condemn? And were they mostly patriarchal? Were they men? Okay, and then who did Jesus empathize with? Who did he elevate? Who did he support and encourage? And were they the victims of patriarchy or a ruling class of Jewish and Greco-Roman upper society? And these are some of the most significant questions in understanding the ministry of Jesus and who Jesus was. So when we examine all four of the Gospels together, a remarkably consistent pattern does emerge. So I'm going to be doing a talk where I'm taking a little bit of this in another month in August anyway, so this will be a good talk for me to get a little bit of feedback from you guys on this anyway. So let's take a look at the definition and understanding of patriarchy. Okay, so the origin of patriarchy, that was, first of all, it was never a term until the 1880s. Okay, so there was a concept, but there was not the term patriarchy. Okay, patriarchy really came into existence in the modern feminist movement back in the late 1960s, 1970s. It's now a sociology term. It was really popularized with a book from Kate Millett in her 1970 book, Sexual Politics. Things shifted to where it went from first of all, let's go back. The origins of what we would now call patriarchy actually started with more of a family, familiar type of thing back 4000 BC. And that goes back where anthropologists, historians trace that origin back to when we first started agriculture, private property, and organized warfare. Okay, so as wealth was accumulated, this kind of became the quote rule of the father, and it was, deemed that for centuries actually until 1884 when Engels was the one who actually came up with the term patriarchy, meaning the origin of the family, private property, and state. And he argued that patriarchy emerged to allow men to pass down private property to their sons. So we're looking at patriarchy in more of a sociological sense here. It's a social system in which men hold primary power and predominate in the roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, and control of property. Okay, so Jesus could not exactly challenge patriarchy if there was no such thing as patriarchy back then, but certainly the concept and the reality of the exploitation was there in society. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be looking at. So, first of all, any comments or questions about how we're going to be doing this? Here we go. And keep your comments succinct so we can try and get everything in.
This may not pertain to this lesson, but I hear a lot of stuff around, like on Facebook and other social media groups, that Adam and Eve was the first people on Earth, and that obviously is not true. And I would like for somebody to do a in-depth talk on when people actually started, was on Earth, and how many generations in between that and Adam and Eve has been
Okay.
been done. So that is something I think it needs to be done along with talks like this.
We got to remember there are a lot of stories in the Bible that, in Unity especially, but in most religions, we don't take them literally, right? They're allegorical. And so they're meant to convey somewhat of a message of whatever. Yes?
It also says it in the Bible that they were not the first. It says that they created men and women, and then the next chapter is about Adam and Eve.
Okay.
So, yeah.
One since you did point that out, I am going to say in Genesis, it does say we are all made in the image of God, male and female equally. Okay, so that kind of points the direction. It sets the foundation. So Jesus rarely condemned people because of their social status, their ethnicity, their gender. Rather, he consistently criticized people who used religious, political, or economic power to dominate, exclude, or exploit others. This was basically his life. He was really a pretty political person. Okay? He was challenging the system. Okay? Conversely, he consistently welcomed and elevated those who were marginalized, overlooked, or oppressed. Okay? So, who did Jesus strongly criticize? There were 5 different systems or people that he criticized. The first one were religious leaders. Okay, the strongest words that Jesus ever spoke were directed towards religious leaders. And these included the Pharisees. Does anybody know what the Pharisees were?
Yes.
Any comments?
Yes.
And another one.
No, we're talking about the Pharisees now.
It should be noted that Jesus once said that these people will be going into the kingdom before you, which includes the fact that there is hope for them. He didn't say you're doomed to eternal punishment.
Oh, that's a good
He
point.
said
Though.
that you will go,
Yeah.
you will eventually make.
Good point. Pharisees controlled the synagogues, okay? And there's a difference here. The synagogue, we have the synagogues and we have the temple, right? Okay, so the Pharisees controlled the synagogues. They held too much power, and they used man-made laws rather than the written laws of the Torah. So they basically made up their own rules, and Jesus is condemning. Okay. Some scribes now. If you look at any of the history, or if you read the scholars about what scribes did in the Bible, scribes had a lot of power, right? They were very educated. They're the ones who wrote down things that we now get and we now understand as, well, is this real, or was that something a scribe put in? So Jesus was criticizing the scribes. The lawyers, okay, certain lawyers. Now, back then, the lawyers were mostly using the law of the Torah, right? Because that was what the law was, okay? And then he was also criticizing the chief priests, the temple authorities, and his criticism was not because they were Jewish. Jesus himself was Jewish, right? But because they often use religion to gain status and control.
Did they use the Pentateuch laws as well, like Leviticus?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah,
so-
but I don't know enough about
Which
the chronology to
which
know exactly when that came into place. The Torah, first of all, is the first 5 books of the Bible.
Oh, okay, so that's the same.
Yeah.
It's the
Okay.
Pentateuch.
Okay. All right. So, just a comment. Go ahead.
They also controlled the temple sacrifices. That's all I remember.
Thank you. That's absolutely right. Okay. Wendy. And any other comments that you have here about anything I've said so far?
So I'm just going to interject this
Yeah.
as part of the thought process when we're going through this.
Uh-huh.
Is that unity? In unity, we use the Bible to see our own internal workings.
Yes, we do.
And so, actually in the Abraham group yesterday, we were talking about that sometimes we make up a set of rules, a set of laws that work at that time in our life. But then we come to that time, and this is the time when Jesus is there, where we begin to say, this is not going to work anymore, guys. You got to go by a higher way. And so we see that inside ourselves, where we're coming to that place and going to have to let go of the old laws and rules that we've made so we can.
Thanks, Wendy. Yeah,
Like
I love
killing
that.
animals.
Cameron?
Like killing animals as a way to worship God.
Okay. And that's a good point. Matthew 23, perhaps Jesus' harshest chapter says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. So he accuses them of hypocrisy, of pride, neglecting justice, neglecting mercy, neglecting faithfulness. He says in Matthew 23, you have neglected the weightier matters of law. And he's talking about the lawyers here in the priesthood. You've neglected justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Okay. I'm sorry, who? Oh, Larry? Okay, I'm sorry.
Can you hear? Okay. Right when I walked in, you made a comment that a lot of Unity sees a lot of the stories as allegorical, and I'm open to allegorical interpretations, metaphysical interpretations. But a lot of Unity people, they automatically then will cancel out the literal. And during COVID, my obsession was with the ancient Middle East,
With the what, I'm sorry?
ancient Israel, ancient Middle East,
Mhm.
and during COVID, and a lot of those old so-called made-up fairy tales, they're actually archaeologists are finding out that evidence to support that. So just because something has a metaphysical twist to it doesn't automatically cancel out the literal.
I agree. And there are a lot of things in the Bible that I definitely believe are literal. And in fact, maybe the majority, I don't know. The thing is, we don't know exactly what was written, why it was written, where, by who, and the chronology of it. And in other words, let me give you an example. Okay, so, and I've used this before in class, Jesus meets this woman at the well where they're going to stone him, right? And he goes, you without, fault, cast the first stone. And everybody walks away, right? And so that story, although I love the story, it's one of my favorite stories, didn't show up in any of the Bibles until around, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, around 1200 to 1300. So how is it possible that all of our written material before 1400 didn't include that story, and then in 1400 it just shows up in a Bible that someone put out? How is that story real? I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying the chances of it being real are not very good. It's a great story, but it's probably not true. Okay, that's what I'm talking about when I say not everything in the Bible can we just take at absolute word value.
Yeah, but we still have trouble with any part of it. There's just, even the first word that was written afterwards, 75, 80 years after it was a fiction.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, yes, if it wasn't for me,
Yeah.
if it wasn't for the shroud, Jesus wouldn't exist.
Okay. This is fun. This isn't part of my talk, but Gallup did a poll, and this is just opinion, and asked how many people believe that the Bible is totally literal. And we're talking about people in the U.S., okay, not people in the world. Anybody guess what the percentage might be?
35. 35.
20. 20% of people believe that the Bible is literal. If you ask evangelical Christians, is the Bible literal? What percent?
80.
Less than 50, less than half. Okay, you would think that they would be the ones that would be the proponents of literalism in the Bible. So all I'm saying is, and because none of us know what's literal, what's not literal. We can only, in my mind, and this is what I like to use Bible scholars, both conservative and more progressive, and just regular historians that aren't really maybe Christians and use Christian. I like to look at the whole thing and see what do they think. And pretty much, what Brenda had said about Adam and Eve, in my mind anyway, not maybe to a lot of people, they want to take that literally. Okay, you have every right to take it literally. I don't.
Now, let's go back to that the story that you told about the one that just appeared in 1400. What version of the Bible was that came out at that time?
I don't know. That actually came from a scholar named Bart Ehrman.
Okay. But he didn't say what the version was.
I don't remember. He probably did.
You're really close to the Gutenberg printing.
Could have been. Yeah, it could have been.
Okay.
But again, my point being, that was a scribe, even though it was 1400. It was a scribe that did that. Somebody did that.
It hadn't been seen before that.
Not it. At least it had not been in written form. You got to remember, so much of the Bible was written, also taken down from generations of oral, right? And so, could this have been passed? Yeah, it could have been passed orally. However, for 1400 years without it being written, I think that's a stretch.
It was the Gutenberg Bible.
Was it? Okay. Tell me your name again.
Zach.
Zach. Okay, Zach.
So something I thought was funny. So you know how the oral tradition, they say that it was passed down orally. I always think about what's the hardest thing to remember. Usually, is names. So I always think it's funny that Genesis starts the way it does, because it's just a list of names, and I think after you remember all that, you might have a hard time remembering the rest of it.
Good point. In Luke 11, Jesus says to the lawyers, "You load people with burdens hard to bear, and you yourselves do not lift a finger to ease them." Do we notice that in today's world? Yeah. Okay. So much of what Jesus was teaching is so applicable for today if we really look at the pattern of what he was teaching, what he was doing at the time. Boy, I look at so much and it just seems so much of a carbon copy. Remember now, when Jesus is talking about, he's condemning the lawyers, he's not talking about theology. He's talking about oppression. Okay. How does that look today? Okay. Just think about it. Just how does it look? Okay, the second group that he condemned were the wealthy religious aristocracy, the Sadducees. Now, the Sadducees, as opposed to the Pharisees, they controlled the temple. Okay? So the temple was the big thing, right? Where everybody came and they sacrificed their animals, and then all of a sudden the temple authorities say, "Oh, well, you don't need to bring your animals anymore, just bring money." Okay? They were closely allied with Rome. Okay? Who was the power structure back then? Rome. Okay? Still is. Okay, so they were trying to maintain political power, right? So Jesus, what did Jesus do? He goes in, he wants cleansing the temple. In Matthew and Mark and John, he directly challenges the economic religious system, okay? So today, if we have a person or a group or society challenging our system, what happens? All hell can break loose, right? Okay? The system in power wants to stay in power. They want to stay in control. And so anybody who comes up against that, they're going to get hell, and Jesus got hell. Right? They killed him for it. Okay, so he overturned the money changers and the merchants. Okay, Isaiah and Jeremiah are quoted, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." Okay. The third group he was criticizing was wealthy people who ignored the poor. Jesus frequently warned the rich, not because wealth itself was evil, but because attachment to wealth often blinded people to others. Do we not see this in ourselves even? Do we not see that in society where, and there are even groups out there, religious groups, churches, that they put wealth as the top. This is how you get into heaven. You become wealthy, and I'm not going to name groups, but they're very obvious. And it's all, and it's not about looking at what Jesus was teaching about helping the poor. It's about getting wealthy. Okay? So Jesus was very clear on this. In Mark 10, he was talking about the rich young ruler. He said, go and sell all your possessions and give it to the poor. In Luke 12, he was talking about a rich fool, warning against greed and placing ultimate security in material wealth. In Luke, he was talking about the rich man Lazarus. He was talking about earthly wealth is temporary. Our relationship with God has eternal consequences. In Matthew 19:24, he said, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. How does the church justify now the vast amount of wealth that goes on with them, let alone society? Anybody have anything they want to say about this? Go ahead, Zach.
I think something important is that he says those who are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I think the key thing there is poor in spirit.
Okay,
Not
if that's
necessarily
the case, then how come Jesus also when he talked about that, right? We're talking about the Sermon on the Mount. He directly said he was talking about the hungry, about those who are thirsty, those who were strangers, those who were naked, those who were prisoners. He was talking about the poor as well as we're all poor in spirit.
Yeah, but I think what he was trying to say is, even if you're wealthy, if you're poor in spirit, inevitably you're going to give your wealth. I think is what he was trying to say.
Okay.
When you understand and you fully are compassionate for others and you understand other people's struggles, inevitably when you become rich, you will
good point,
give
Zach.
it away if
I
you're
like
poor
that.
in spirit. That's what I was trying to get to.
Thank you. Wendy.
So, a good friend of mine who's a really amazing woman, but right now is a time where there's a lot of fear going on in everything. And it was interesting because I was talking to her on the phone, and she said, one of the problems with this world is that we have so many people that are taking and so many things. And because I was telling her about giving to people on the street, and she said, you are creating more of that. You're creating more. You're creating, by giving to people on the street, you're creating more people on the street. So, well, and sometimes I don't think it's the riches that is behind it. I think there can be fear.
Yeah.
And there is in some ways a little bit of truth to that, because if
in other words, enabling,
yeah. So yes, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But how do we help each other be strong?
That's a good question that I've asked myself a few times too. You know, is it right for me to do that when I feel like, is this enabling someone, to go out and do something that is not going to be beneficial really to them? Go ahead.
So, having a daughter that went to Raymond Bible Training School and Oral Roberts University, some of the thinking in the charismatic is that God created wealth. I mean, Abraham was very wealthy. He had all kinds of, flocks and herds.
Mm-hmm.
So it isn't the wealth that's bad. And so they believe that you should be using everything that God gave you to create wealth, because, and I look at Louise Hay, who was very wealthy, but she used it to help people. And so depending on your mindset, and sometimes when you get into that wealth trap, it becomes a trap.
Yeah.
And then you just want more and more. So it isn't the wealth that is the problem. It's your mindset with how you use it and what you do with it. And it's difficult to get in the mindset where you're accumulating and not get into that trap.
Yeah.
Louise Hay did an amazing job of, giving back.
Okay, we've got to keep our comments succinct, okay, so we can all have time to talk, and I can also get this in.
I was just going to mention, it's interesting how there's a lot of the 1% billionaire, trillionaire folks, that there's a group of them who have committed to give away 90% plus of their wealth. And then there's some that are putting all their money and trying to concentrate all of the power and the money into a fewer number of people.
So we were talking last night about the scripture that says it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. And Jesus clearly says, what are the greatest commandments? You love God, you love yourself, and you love your neighbor. The love comes through those three things. And the love of money, when that becomes your highest thing, it is evil. It goes against.
So that attachment to evil, that love of money is what
So I just looked it up, and it's because I saw it on the TV. So the unemployment rate, when I saw it on the TV, was around 4%, like 4.3, 4.44. The homeless population is 0.11, so 0.11%. So it's less, it's a tenth of a percentage.
Yeah.
So overall, most, like what she was saying about her friend who said, oh, well, if we give to people on the street, there's going to be more people on the street. When there's only 0.1% of a percentage of people on the street, I would say we clearly don't have that much of a problem with it. So if there's more of them, we'll bring it back down if it's a problem.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there is something to be said for enabling. There is. We know it exists, and at the same time, we have to balance that inside ourselves between helping and giving, and are we hurting? So the fourth people that Jesus criticized, condemned, were the political rulers. Jesus rarely attacked Rome directly, yet he challenged worldly power repeatedly. In Luke, he said, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, but not so with you. Lord it over them. Does anybody get what that means?
Half power over.
Okay, so Jesus is redefining leadership. Okay, he's saying you, a secular model of power, rulers, you're using dominance to force your control on people, and Jesus is teaching his followers that greatness is achieved through humble sacrificial sacrifice rather than status or authority. Okay, so he's changing the mind shift. Okay, you as my followers, I want you to follow the kingdom of God. I don't want you following secular leaders. Okay, the fifth one, those who harmed little ones. Okay, Matthew 18:6 states, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Jesus said this. Okay. When we hurt those the most vulnerable, Jesus, I mean, I don't know how much more harsh do you have to be? How much more blatant do you have to say it? And so, what do we have going on today? The exploitation of children is worse than I've ever seen it in my life. Now, maybe it has always been going on and it's not been publicized, popularized. It's awful. And I thought it was so interesting. Now, this is just my opinion. You may have a very different opinion. But if you look at the Epstein files, and you look back at the past 10 years, and those who are talking about conspiracy theories, and one political party being the bad guys, and they're the ones who are exploiting, and they're the ones who are running child exploitation rings. And then at the same time now, those are the same people who are trying to shut down opening the Epstein files.
Trying to shut down what?
The Epstein files. Go ahead, Zach. Oh, I'm sorry. Make it quicker, please.
So, this is not meant to be political at all, but Harry Potter's name in the Harry Potter books was said 19,000 times. I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this is exactly accurate, but Trump's name was mentioned 38,000 times in the Epstein files. So I don't know if he's a main character.
So having been one of those children, there came a time when I was kind of looking at, if we just make our children the only thing that is innocent, the only thing, in some ways we make it a target for evil. So what I'm saying, the thing I looked at is, when I destroy the innocence in anybody, that part in us, when we hurt the adults' innocence and cause them to lose it, it's the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. Okay, I have to move on because there's time. Okay, so I talked about the people that Jesus condemned and criticized, right? I made it pretty obvious who he criticized and condemned. Who did Jesus defend? The number one group that he defended were women. Okay. No first century Jewish teacher interacted with women as openly as Jesus, especially in his time. Okay. It's not recorded in history that any other teacher did what he did. He was unique in that way. Examples include Mary Magdalene, Mary and Martha, woman at the well, woman caught in adultery, which I just talked about that story. Woman with chronic bleeding, the widow of Nain, the widow's offering, the sinful woman who anoints Jesus, women at the cross, women at the resurrection. My talk next Sunday is going to be, it's called Sisters in the Scripture. I'm going to be talking about the women that played a huge role in the early church, in even before Christ and during the life of Christ, because I think they've been kept out of history. And I think it's important that we look at what Luke 8, it says, women traveled with Jesus. Even more surprisingly, they financially supported him. In John 4, Jesus publicly speaks alone with a Samaritan woman. And this violated at the time all sorts of multiple social expectations. And then, of course, we talked about John 8, women caught in adultery. Okay, the second group that he defended were the poor. Okay, we talked about this already. So I'm going to go on to the next one, children. Jesus defended children over and over. Matthew 19, it says, let the little children come to me. Okay? Jesus is talking about the innocence. And if we talk about unity, we're going to have to look at that, in ourselves. What is important in ourselves is that innocence, that we can see that. We want to protect that. Children possess almost no status in Roman society, and Jesus places them at the center. The fourth group of people that Jesus uplifted.
Did you say children?
What's that?
Did you say children?
Yes.
Unless you were adopted. In Roman society, so the way it worked in Roman society was, if you were adopted, your parents could not abandon you. In Roman society, your parents could not abandon you.
We're talking about Jesus, though.
I know. I was just, yeah. I just thought about that.
Okay, that's fine. That's an interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
Zach. Thank you.
If you were biological, you could abandon the kid. But if you were adopted, it's kind of symbolic of what it's kind of like symbolic of what happened with Jesus. I don't know exactly, but the adopted son of God, kind of like he can't abandon them type thing. But, yeah.
I'm going to look that up. That's a good point. Thank you. The fourth group that he uplifted, that he supported, disabled people. Think about that. We have a story of the blind Bartimaeus. We have a story of the paralyzed man, of the man born blind, of the crippled woman, of the deaf man. These are all stories in our, four Gospels. Okay? In Mark 1, he talks about the lepers. Jesus touches a leper. Never happened before. This was socially shocking. Okay? It was interesting. Sue and I were talking about the caste system last night. And I was telling her about, in India, up until recently, the caste system was legal. And so you had those in the upper echelons are the Brahmins. Okay. What are they? They're the more light-colored skin. Why are they light-colored skin? Because they came from blood of the Aryans. Okay, the Aryans came down the Indus Valley thousands of years ago, and they mixed with the local darker skin population, and so they were a lighter skin. Okay, and at the bottom of the rung in the caste system, there are 5 levels. Are the untouchables. Okay, the untouchables are next to dirt. They're the darkest skin. They are people that you wouldn't even have as your servant. You can't touch them. Okay. They outlawed the caste system in India not that long ago. In our lifetimes. Okay. And yet it still goes on. It just goes on under the law. Okay. This happens in other societies too. It is still going on, folks. Okay.
Just like there's still sundowner towns in Missouri.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's here.
True. Brenda, quick comment.
I just seen a Facebook page on a Facebook. It said, "Is there any towns in Missouri where black people cannot spend the night?"
Yeah.
And Eldorado Springs used to have a sign on the south end of the park, no black people allowed to spend the night in the city.
The first day I drove into Missouri to move here, moved to near West Plains, and there was a town outside. I'm not even going to say the name of the town. When I pulled up to that town, and we had a farm out in the country about 5 miles from there. First thing I noticed was a sign coming into town saying, in the N-word, "Don't get caught after dark." That was when I moved here in the 80s.
Wow. Is that, I'll say the name of the town, is that Ava?
Nope.
Well,
But it could be.
There was one there too, and it said niggers out of town before sundown.
Yeah. One of my close friends that grew up around Ava, he was born and raised there. He told me stories that would rattle your bones. I mean, it was the discrimination, the hatred for anybody that was not part of that local, or that was outside of their, our culture. Yeah.
We could all of us could tell stories all day long. Harrison had a Ku Klux Klan was the next mile trash pickup, and it got taken down. I got to much, but so I love that you're sharing and focusing in this time that we have. What do we do? And so what in our daily lives can we do about it? And I went to a leadership training one time, and they said the people in their 60s at any given time are the people who are like the power and money and political power. And right now, it occurs to me that those people are of a generation that were kind of touched by the depression and the laws, and so hopefully we'll outgrow. I don't know. That's my hope.
Zach, I'm going to have to cut you off here. We only have so much time. I'm sorry. Rather than seeing disability as divine punishment, Jesus responds with healing and dignity. Okay, so the next group, and this is something that seems a little, I don't know what's the word, contrast anyway, tax collectors. Jewish people hated tax collectors, right? Because they were from, Rome demanded that the Jews pay a tax, right? And so somebody had to go collect those taxes. Well, there was a story in the Bible with Zacchaeus, right? What Zacchaeus did was he climbed a sycamore tree because he wanted to see Jesus talk, but he also gave half of his money away half of all the money away to the poor. And Jesus elevated it. Jesus saying, even those whom you hate, whom we're supposed to hate, we love them. And, this person has so much faith, okay? Jesus saw the possibility in Zacchaeus where others only saw disgrace. Okay? The sixth group that he elevated were the Samaritans. Now, you've all heard of the story of the Good Samaritan, right? Okay. Who were the Samaritans? I'm going to go ahead and talk because I've only got so much time.
Half-breeds.
Okay. The Samaritans came from a land called Samaria. They were a distinct ethnic and religious group. They were a mixed population of Israelites and foreigners, Gentiles, okay? They intermarried. Jewish society hated them. Okay, they would have been the untouchables, okay? And yet, so Jesus elevated them, okay? He talked about them with the Good Samaritan, the story of the Good Samaritan, where he heals the Samaritan leper. He speaks with a Samaritan woman. That was truly antisocial. And he makes Samaritans heroes. Okay. The seventh group were you and me, Gentiles. Okay. There was a Roman centurion, okay, who came to Jesus. And this Roman centurion wanted Jesus to be with his servant because his servant was dying. And, and Jesus did. So Jesus heals this person. And Jesus said, you have the greatest faith in all of Israel, even though this person wasn't even Jew. Okay. There was a story of a Syrophoenician woman who asked Jesus to drive out the demons of his daughter, which he then worked with that woman. So many Gentiles in our scriptures actually received healing from Jesus outside of the Jewish community, outside of Jesus' people. And the last group that Jesus elevated were the sinners. Okay. Repeatedly, Jesus eats with prostitutes, with tax collectors, with the social outcasts. In Luke 15, he talks about the lost sheep. Remember that story about how the shepherd leaves his 99 sheep safe in the forest and goes looking for that one. That one, okay? There's a story of the lost coin where the inherently valuable are worth seeking out. In other words, so a woman had 10 coins and she lost one, and she goes looking all over for it to be found. And then there's the story of the prodigal son, the inheritance, where the son gets his inheritance, he goes and spends it all, and he hits rock bottom and he comes back to his father. What does the father do? He doesn't condemn him. He celebrates, he throws a party. Okay, this is all, again, these aren't to be taken literally. These are allegory again, and they're supposed to create a picture of elevating those at the lowest echelon of society, those who are sinners, okay? Okay, so were these people that Jesus condemned victims of patriarchy? Okay. Women lived under legal inequality, limited education, restricted testimony in court, and dependence on fathers or husbands. Widows were economically vulnerable, as you can imagine. So, women accused of adultery faced very severe consequences, and yet Jesus repeatedly restores dignity to these women. So, many occupied the lowest rungs of both the Jewish and Greco-Roman society that Jesus did elevate. just a quick question here. I'll take a quick comment or two. How do we treat the lowest rung today? If we truly, honestly look at ourselves in our society, how do we treat? Isn't any different? You know? But personally, how do we treat others? And I myself criticize myself a lot because I don't feel like I'm doing enough. I don't speak out enough. And yet, you know, at the same time, it's like, it's something to, I think, it's something to look at. Jerry.
I guess this is where I have to recognize that whoever that is that's sitting there in front of me is just as powerful as I am.
Good point.
And they have also chosen the life that they are living in.
Yeah.
And so I just have to let it go.
Okay, well, I won't agree with you there, but I'll take that. In Galatians, it does say, this is something that Paul wrote. He goes, neither male nor female, you are all one in Christ. Right? We are all equal. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Jesus was raised in the Jewish faith, and to my understanding, the number one prayer as a rabbi is to love the Lord God with all your heart, your mind, your body. And Jesus knew that prayer very well.
Yeah.
And so that's why he went into explaining to love your neighbor as yourself. As and so he's trying to show that other is you.
Yeah.
And then it goes on down from there.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few minutes left here. Were Jesus's opponents mostly men? Yeah, they were. They're all men. But not because they were men. Okay. Okay. All of the people that Jesus opposed were men. However, it wasn't because they were men. It was because they had that position of public authority. They were it was men who had public authority, and they included the Pharisees, the chief priests, the scribes, the Sanhedrin members. I had to look that one up. Sanhedrin members were a supreme religious and judicial council. There were 71 of them. They were all men. Temple officials, Herod, Pilate, Roman officers. Sorry, guys, they're all men. This reflects a first century patriarchal structure. Even though there wasn't such a word back then, I'm basically saying, you can have your own opinion. I'm basically saying, yeah, that was pretty much a patriarchal group we were going on. So, and I'm gonna say the other side of the coin too. Okay, notably, Jesus also had many male friends, right? He had many male disciples, apostles. He healed many men. He praised the faith of men, of many men. So his criticism was aimed at the misuse of power, not at masculinity itself. So we're talking about abuse, we're talking about oppression. We're not singling out men as a gender. We're singling out a system created by those in power. Don.
Getting back just for a moment to the very poor and their position with regard to those in charge. Even here in modern day, this town, this city, the homeless are not allowed to be here. Legally,
they can't sleep.
No, they're not allowed to stay anywhere, to stand anywhere, to beg anywhere, to do anything
They're shutting it off.
They've certainly made a lot of laws that make it very, very difficult, that's for sure. And in order to survive, it's almost like if you are that way, you have to break the law, which is crazy, but and yet we don't have a structure that is going to help alleviate other situations, whether it be mental illness, drug abuse, poverty,
Affordable housing.
affordable housing. So one New Testament scholar summarized it this way, quote, "The people most certain they were inside God's favor often found themselves challenged by Jesus, while the people told they were outside of God's favor often found themselves welcomed by him." Okay. So that pattern appears throughout the gospel several times. So it's difficult to dispute in my mind. And one of the things that I love about being able to do a class like this or to do a talk in church is because I do research. And when you do research, you learn things. and to me, I start looking all this stuff up and I go, oh my gosh, it's amazing to me. And that's why I came up with the title, Jesus Challenging Patriarchy, because at least I believe that Jesus was almost exclusively challenging patriarchy. And, if we look at a real definition of what patriarchy is. So, from a unity perspective, the pattern could be understood metaphysically as well as historically. Christ calls every person beyond the ego's desire to dominate and into the recognition of the divine image in each and every one of us. Wherever power is used to diminish another sacred word, Jesus' words become prophetic. Wherever people are excluded or devalued, his actions become restorative. And that spiritual trajectory naturally challenges not only first century patriarchy, but any modern system, whether based on gender, race, wealth, nationality, religion, or status, that denies the equal divine dignity of God's children. I'm just going to state a conclusion and then I'll read the announcements. For unity and new thought, this reveals a profound spiritual principle. Divine love flows towards healing, inclusion, and liberation, while exposing every system built on fear, superiority, and separation. And with that, thank you very much.
Could you repeat that?
The conclusion? Yeah. Okay. For unity and new thought, this reveals a profound spiritual principle. Divine love flows towards healing, inclusion, and liberation, while exposing every system built on fear, superiority, and separation.
I'd like to point out that gender isn't actually in that conclusion, and that it is that power structures do happen to have a patriarchal because of history and stuff, but that he loved those he was challenging.
He did. Yeah. All right, announcements. Everyone's invited tonight, 6 o'clock. We do meditation here. The next prosperity team meetings tomorrow at 6. Everybody's invited. We meet in this room. Starting this week, we'll have chair yoga sessions on Wednesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 10. It's $8, by the way. Next Sunday, we'll be crazy guys talking in church next week. Don't come. Paul Day's back as a speaker. And he's going to be talking about sisters of the scripture. Okay. Next Sunday, join us at 9:15 here. New Thought, John Brocker, Art and Science of Allowing. Unity Spiritual Center has invited everyone to join them for a movie night on July 22nd, 6:30. They'll be showing What the Bleep Do We Know? Popcorn and drinks will be provided. Okay, on Friday, July 24th, 5 p.m., we come together to prepare and serve dinner for the residents of Eden Village too. I know Sue and I signed up for that. I don't know if we need more people. I'm assuming we do, otherwise it wouldn't be in the announcements. Eden Village is a community of tiny homes that provides permanent supportive housing for individuals who experience chronic homelessness. Okay, we're looking for 10 to 15 volunteers to cook, serve, and visit with residents. If you'd like to volunteer, please sign up in the connection table outside here. Our next community through music outdoor concert, July 25th at 7 p.m. We're going to have Joel and Michelle Van Hoos, which is great. I love their music. Iced X Coffee, Robot, and the Fancy Animal Lauren Slater to our outdoor stage. Bring friends and lawn chairs and come and enjoy the great local talent. If you haven't been here with it, it is so much fun. At 7 o'clock on July 25th. It's free. And August 1st, we're having luau. You don't want to miss this fundraiser. 6 to 9, August 1st, $25 a person. Get a delicious meal, 2 drinks, live music, and it is fun. We've done it so many years now, and it's just a blast. In August, we'll be starting our collecting items for our next yard sale, September 11th and 12th. So think about this. August, start bringing your stuff, and we hold it in the big room back here on the children's wing here. So it's always a big fundraiser for us, and it's always fun to do. So, okay, we're going to get in a circle. Thanks for coming.